The last thing I heard before everything changed was silence. Not the quiet kind. Not peace. This was a silence that pressed against your chest. A silence that told you something was very, very wrong. I had spent my career reading danger. Every nerve in my body was firing at once. And then I saw it. And I knew the world I thought I understood was gone. My name is Daniel Reeves. I am 62 years old. For 28 years, I served as a commander in the United States Navy. I have spent the last 31 years of my life trying to forget a single mission. A mission that took place in March of 1994. A mission that, officially, never happened. I am not here because I want attention. I am not here because I enjoy the spotlight. I am here because my doctor gave me 4 months. Maybe 5 if I'm lucky. And I refuse to let this secret follow me into the ground. So let me start from the beginning. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, the son of a steelworker and a schoolteacher. I was the first in my family to attend the Naval Academy. I believed in duty. I believed in service. I believed that the men giving me orders were protecting something worth protecting. I was wrong about that last part. Not entirely. But wrong enough that it cost me everything. By 1994, I had done 2 tours in the Gulf. I had survived combat. I had buried men I loved. I was stationed at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and I was 38 years old. I was already planning my retirement. A house somewhere quiet, maybe Oregon, maybe Montana. Then on a Tuesday morning in early March, everything ended. A runner came to my quarters at 05:30, Commander Reeves. Admiral Preston wants you in his office. Now, not in an hour, not after breakfast. Now, I pulled on my uniform and walked across the base in the dark. The hallways in the admin building were empty at that hour. My boots echoed against the concrete floor. I pushed open the door to Preston's office. The Admiral was seated behind his desk, but he wasn't alone. 3 men stood behind him in identical dark suits. No rank. No insignia. No name tags. Just suits and eyes that had seen things they would never talk about. Preston didn't stand. He didn't offer his hand. He simply looked at me and said, "Commander, you've been selected." "What for?" "Admiral. An operation of critical importance. National security. Highest classification. You have 30 seconds to accept or decline. If you decline, this conversation never occurred. If you accept, your life changes permanently. 30 seconds. I didn't even know what I was agreeing to, but I had spent 2 decades following orders. I said yes. The suits exchanged a look. One opened a briefcase. He slid a thin folder across the desk. "You deploy in 48 hours. South Pacific. All coordinates classified. Mission objective classified. You will be part of a 12-man team. You will not tell anyone, including your spouse. If anyone asks, you are attending routine, deep water training exercises. Is that understood?" It was understood. The next 48 hours were the loneliest of my life. My wife, Carol, asked why I seemed distant at dinner. I told her I was tired. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She told me to be careful out there. She smiled the way she always smiled, and I smiled back knowing I was lying to the woman who trusted me most. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat in the kitchen alone. I opened the folder in the dark. Inside were dossiers on the other 11 men, deep water divers, sonar specialists, a marine geologist, a biologist. But something else caught my eye immediately. Not their qualifications. Not their service records. Their family profiles. None of them had more than 2 children. All their children were adults. 18 or older. None of them had living parents. Someone had assembled this team with extraordinary precision. Not for their skills alone. for their absence of complications. These were men who could disappear without too many questions being asked. That realization should have made me walk away. Instead, it just made me more certain that whatever we were heading toward was real, and very dangerous. At 400 hours, we assembled at an isolated pier on the far edge of the base. No ceremony, no send-off, no witnesses, just 12 men in the dark, a concrete dock, and those suits. One of the suits walked down the line and handed each of us a small device, about the size of a thick wristwatch. "Wear this at all times," he said. "It monitors your vital signs. If they stop unexpectedly, measures will be taken to protect the operation and your families." Nobody flinched. Nobody spoke. But every man on that pair understood exactly what had just been said. It was a leash. A very elegant, very terrifying leash. The briefing room was below the pier. Concrete walls. No windows. One projector. 7 minutes. The suit who called himself director showed us a single image. A sonar map. Black background. White geometric lines. Massive shapes on the ocean floor. Structures. Impossible structures. Nothing natural produces right angles at that scale. Nothing natural produces concentric rings 11 kilometers beneath the surface. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice completely flat, "you are being deployed to a location 11,000 meters below sea level. Your objective is to observe and document. What you will encounter has no conventional scientific explanation. Some of you will question your sanity. Others will question everything you have ever believed about this planet. What I need from each of you is control, composure, documentation, silence." He clicked off the projector. The room went dark for a full second before the overhead lights came on. "Board in 10 minutes, he said. "God be with you. You are going to need him down there." I walked back up to the pier beside Dr. Aaron Mitchell, the team's biologist. He leaned close and kept his voice low. "Commander, do you have any idea what we're walking into?" I looked at him. "Not a single one," I said. "But I guess we're going to find out." And that was the last ordinary thing either of us said. Because when we reached the end of the pier, and I saw the submarine waiting in the dark water, I stopped walking. Every instinct I had went cold at once. Because that was not a submarine I had ever seen before. That was not a submarine anyone had ever seen before. In 24 years of naval service, I had been aboard more submarines than I could count. I knew their shapes. I knew their sounds. I knew how they smelled from 50 yards. What was docked at the end of that pair was none of those things. The hull was painted a black so complete it seemed to absorb the pier lights. No hull numbers. No insignia. No American flag. Nothing. The shape was wrong. Every submarine I had ever seen had hard angles, visible seams, obvious construction. This vessel was smooth, continuous, almost organic in its curves, like it had grown rather than been built. I walked to the edge of the dock and reached down. I pressed my palm flat against the hull. No rivets. No welds. No seams. One continuous surface, smooth as polished stone, and it was warm, not slightly warm, noticeably warm, like pressing your hand against living skin. "Ramirez?" One of the communications techs came up beside me. He touched the hull himself. Pulled his hand back quickly. "What the hell is this made of?" he muttered. Nobody answered. Nobody knew. The captain was waiting at the hatch. Standard Navy uniform, but stripped of everything. No name tape. No rank insignia. No unit patch. "Welcome aboard the DSV Poseidon," he said. "Stow your gear." 15 minutes. We went below. The interior made even less sense than the exterior. The corridors glowed with soft blue light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. No fixtures. No bulbs. Just light emanating from the material. Every corner was rounded. Every surface smooth. I ran my hand along the corridor wall. It was warm. Slightly pliable. Like touching the inside of something alive. Ramirez muttered behind me. "This ain't steel. I don't know what this is." We felt the vessel begin to move before we were even seated. No engine sound. No vibration. No mechanical noise of any kind. Just a subtle, gliding sensation, like being carried. I made my way to the control room. The panels were nothing like any naval vessel I had operated near. Everything was digital touch interfaces, smooth screens, no physical switches or dials. The officers moved their fingers across the surfaces with practiced ease. I asked the nearest officer how the propulsion system worked. He glanced at me without slowing his movements. "Magnetohydrodynamics," he said. "Electromagnetic fields expel water through the hull, no moving parts. No acoustic signature. Completely invisible to standard sonar." I asked when it was built. He gave me a quiet, tired smile. "That's not the right question, Commander," he said. "The right question isn't when. It's where, and by whom." He went back to his screens without another word. I stood there and let that sit in my chest like a stone. We descended for the next 6 hours. The crew moved with the calm efficiency of people who had made this trip before. Nobody spoke unnecessarily. Nobody explained anything. The rest of our team was quiet, each man alone with his thoughts. Dr. Mitchell sat with a notebook, writing in small, tight handwriting. The geologist, a man named Calloway, kept checking depth readings on a shared display. I watched the depth counter drop. 1,000 meters. 2,000. 4,000. At 6,000 meters, Calloway looked up at me. "The Challenger Deep is about 11,000 meters, he said quietly. "That's the deepest point on Earth. And that's where we're going," I said. He nodded. And didn't say another word. At just over 9,000 meters, something changed. The descent slowed. The blue corridor lights shifted, almost imperceptibly, toward green. Then the captain's voice came through the internal comm. "All personnel to observation positions. We are approaching the target coordinates." I went to the forward observation bay. The bay had a wide reinforced viewport made of something that wasn't glass, clearer than glass, harder, without a single distortion. I pressed my face close and looked into the deep. At that depth, there is no light. None. The ocean is absolute darkness. Except it wasn't. Far below us, and I mean far, hundreds of meters still beneath us, something glowed. Not bioluminescence. Not scattered light from our own hull. Something structured. Something deliberate. Points of light arranged in geometric patterns. Lines. Grids. Concentric formations. Calloway appeared at my shoulder. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "Those aren't geological formations," he said. "No," I said. "They are not." The vessel continued its descent. As we got closer, the scale of what we were seeing became harder to process. The structures below us were not small. They were not a research installation or a sunken vessel. They covered the ocean floor in every direction as far as the viewport allowed. Buildings. Towers. Interconnected pathways. Enormous dome structures. All of it glowing from within, a pale bluish, white that made the surrounding darkness feel even more total. Mitchell appeared beside me. His notebook was in his hand. He had stopped writing. He was just staring. "That's a city," he said. His voice was completely flat. Not excited. Not frightened. Just certain. "That's a city," he repeated. The captain came over the comm again. All personnel maintain stations. We are holding at 100 meters above the floor. Observation teams begin documentation. No external transmissions of any kind. We hovered there. 12 men in total silence, pressed against viewports, staring down at something that should not have existed. And then the structures began to move. Not all of them. Not the buildings themselves, but things near the buildings, between the pathways, shapes, large shapes. Moving with fluid, deliberate precision, too large to be human. Too organized to be marine life. Mitchell had his camera to his eye. He lowered it slowly. He turned to look at me. "Commander," he said. "They know we're here." I looked back through the viewport. He was right. Several of the shapes had stopped moving. They were oriented toward us, not toward the bottom. Not toward each other, toward us, toward this vessel, hovering 100 meters above their city. And in the cold stillness of that moment, every rational thought I had ever owned went completely quiet. Because I understood then that we were not the apex of anything. We were not the most advanced intelligence on this planet. We were not even close. We were guests. Uninvited ones, and whatever lived in that city below us, had known we were coming long before we arrived. The lights in the observation bay flickered once. Then all of our screens went dark simultaneously. The captain's voice came through the comm, lower now, tighter. "Stay calm. Stay at your stations." Then a sound began, not through the hull, not through any speaker or sensor array. It resonated directly inside my skull, not painful, but undeniable, a frequency, a pulse, organized, rhythmic, and somehow, impossibly, beginning to feel like language. The sound was not sound. That's the only honest way I can describe it. It didn't enter through my ears. It entered through everything else. My chest, my jaw, the space behind my eyes. It moved through me the way water moves through sand. Complete penetration, no resistance. And it was organized. That was the part that terrified me most. Random noise doesn't have rhythm. Random noise doesn't have structure. This had both. Around me, the other men were reacting. Ramirez had both hands pressed against his temples. Calloway had braced himself against the viewport frame. Mitchell was rigid, eyes wide, lips slightly parted. None of us spoke. We didn't need to. Every man in that observation bay was experiencing the same thing. Something was communicating with us, not transmitting, not broadcasting, communicating. Directly, intentionally, the captain came over the internal comm. His voice was controlled but stripped down to essentials. All personnel remain calm. This is expected. Do not attempt to respond. Expected. He said expected, which meant this had happened before, which meant someone had sent men down here before us and watched this exact moment unfold. The frequency shifted slightly. The rhythm changed, slower now, almost like breathing. And then something happened that I have never been able to fully explain and never will. I saw something. Not with my eyes. My eyes were open, looking at the dark viewport. But somewhere behind them, inside them, I saw a landscape, enormous and ancient and utterly foreign. Structures that dwarfed anything built on the surface. Light that moved like water through crystalline corridors, and beings. Tall, fluid in their movement, luminescent at their edges, faces that were not faces but communicated expression regardless. Not threatening, not welcoming, evaluating. The image lasted perhaps 8 seconds. Then it was gone and I was standing in the observation bay again, gripping the viewport frame so hard my knuckles had gone white, beside me. Mitchell let out a long, shaking breath. "Did you see that?" he whispered. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice yet. Every man in the bay was coming back to himself. Eyes clearing. Hands slowly releasing whatever they had grabbed. The frequency dropped away gradually, like a radio slowly detuning. Then silence. Complete and absolute. The screens came back on. Calloway exhaled. He looked at his instruments, then at me. Whatever that was, he said. It wasn't a natural phenomenon. No, I said. It was not. The captain appeared in the hatchway to the observation bay. He looked at each of us in turn. His expression was not surprised. It was the expression of a man confirming something he already knew would happen. What you experienced was initial contact, he said. It happens on every descent, I said. How many times has this sub made this trip? He paused. Long enough to tell me the number would bother me. Enough times to understand the protocol, he said. He moved into the bay and stood beside the viewport. They initiated it this time, he said quietly. That's new. What does that mean? Mitchell asked. Typically we observe from this distance for several hours before any response. They've never initiated contact this quickly before. He looked out through the viewport at the glowing city below. It suggests escalating interest, he said. Or escalating concern. We remained at station for 4 more hours. During that time, the shapes near the structures continued moving. More of them now. Dozens. Moving in organized patterns. Some of them came closer to us, not threatening. Purposeful. They circled the vessel at a distance of roughly 30 meters, large enough that we could see detail through the viewport. Their forms were elongated. 6 to 8 feet in height, though it was difficult to judge at distance. They moved without the effort that any motion requires in water. Not swimming, not walking, simply moving as though the water had no resistance to them at all. Their skin, if that's what it was, carried its own faint illumination. It shifted as they moved, the way color shifts in oil on water. Mitchell had his camera running continuously. He said nothing for those 4 hours. He just documented. Around the 2-hour mark, one of them came directly to the viewport. Not circling, not passing. It positioned itself immediately on the other side of the reinforced material and stopped. It was close enough that I could have touched it with my hand, if only the viewport weren't there. I looked at its face. I use that word loosely. It was a face in the sense that it oriented toward me, in the sense that I could tell it was looking at me specifically. Its eyes, and there were eyes, were large, dark, and completely still, not the eyes of an animal. Not blank. They held something I have no better word for than awareness. Not just awareness of me as a physical object in its environment. Awareness of me as something particular. Someone. I did not look away. I don't know why. Looking away felt wrong, like breaking a promise I hadn't made yet. We stayed like that for almost a minute. 12 inches of whatever that viewport was made of between its eyes and mine. Then it turned and moved away without urgency. Returned to the others near the structures below. Mitchell lowered his camera. He looked at me. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Calloway spoke from across the bay. His voice was barely audible. It was deciding something, he said. About us. I asked. He thought about it. About whether we were worth talking to, he said. Then the captain's voice came over the comm. All personnel, the observation phase is concluding. We will begin ascent in 30 minutes. Document all instruments. No external transmissions. All personal recordings remain classified. 30 minutes. After a 30-year secret, 30 minutes felt like nothing at all. I took one last look through the viewport. The city still glowed below us. The shapes still moved through its streets. A civilization older than anything on the surface. A civilization that had been here long before the first human stood upright. A civilization we had told absolutely no one about. I pressed my hand flat against the viewport. The glass, or whatever it was cold on this side. Whatever was on the other side was not. We ascended in silence. 12 men who had descended as sailors and were rising as something harder to name. Nobody debriefed us on the way up. Nobody checked on us. The crew moved through their procedures as though the last several hours had been routine. Maybe for them, they had been. That possibility was almost harder to sit with than everything else. I found a seat in the narrow mess corridor and stared at the wall. Ramirez sat down across from me after a while. He didn't ask how I was doing. Smart man. He just put his hands flat on the table and stared at them. After a long time, he said, "My grandfather used to say that the ocean was alive." He meant it spiritually. He paused. "I don't think he was wrong," he said. Then he got up and went back to his station. We surfaced in the early hours of the morning. I don't know the exact time. My watch had stopped during the descent and never restarted. Calloway told me later that 2 of the team's instruments had done the same thing. Simply stopped. No damage. No explanation. Just stopped. When we docked, the suits were waiting. 3 of them, same dark clothes, same flat expressions. Like they had been standing there the whole time we were gone. They walked each of us to a separate room in the facility beneath the pier. My room was concrete. 1 table. 2 chairs. 1 overhead light. One of the suits entered and set a folder on the table. He did not sit. He said, "Commander Reeves, what you witnessed today is classified above top secret. There is no official classification level that covers what you know. So we use a different system." He opened the folder and turned it toward me. Inside was a document. Dense legal language. Several pages. He said, "You will read this. Then you will sign it." I read it. The document was not a standard confidentiality agreement. Standard agreements specify what you cannot say. This one specified what would happen if you said it. Not to you. To the people connected to you. It never used direct language. It was too careful for that. But the meaning was clear as anything I had ever read. If you speak about what you witnessed, the consequences extend outward. To your spouse. To your children. To the people whose names were already listed in the folder behind the document. Carol's name. The names of my 2 sons. Listed in a government document held by men in suits in a concrete room beneath a pier. I looked up at the suit. He was watching me with no expression, he said. The mission never happened. The vessel does not exist. What you saw was a classified deep sea geological survey. If asked, that is your answer. In perpetuity, I picked up the pen. I signed. I signed because I had just watched something look through a viewport at me and make a decision. I signed because I had 12 seconds of contact with a civilization that could, if it chose to, remove every coastal city on Earth. I signed because I understood, finally, the weight of what the committee was actually managing. Not a secret. A relationship. A fragile, ancient, barely maintained relationship between 2 civilizations sharing 1 planet. And I was now part of the machinery that maintained it. The suit took the folder. He said, "You will be debriefed tomorrow. Get some sleep." He left without another word. I sat in that room alone for a long time. Then I walked back to my quarters in the pre-dawn dark. I didn't sleep. I lay on my bunk and stared at the ceiling and cataloged everything I was no longer allowed to say. In the weeks and months that followed, things got harder. Not dramatically. Not in ways I could easily describe to anyone. But I would be in the middle of a normal conversation, a briefing, a dinner with Carol, a phone call with one of the boys, and something would detach inside me. Some fundamental connection to the world I was participating in. Because I knew something about that world that changed everything. The ocean is 71% of this planet's surface. We have explored less than 5% of it. That has always been presented as a scientific limitation. Funding, technology, depth pressure. The technical challenges of deep ocean exploration. Those explanations are not false. They're just not complete. The real reason we have not gone deeper is simpler. We were told not to. There are restricted zones in every major ocean. Officially, they're military exercise areas, research exclusion zones, protected maritime environments. Some of them are those things. But some of them are borders, territorial limits for a civilization that doesn't surface, lines that were drawn in agreements we don't acknowledge having. I spent the next decade trying to be a normal naval officer. I got promoted. I attended ceremonies. I trained younger sailors. I watched colleagues retire and move on. 3 of the men from our mission died within 4 years of our return. Jenkins, one of the sonar specialists, was found in his apartment. They called it a suicide. Carol saw the news item and mentioned it to me. I said I didn't know him well and changed the subject. Rodriguez, a communications tech, died in a car accident. Straight road. Clear day. No other vehicle involved. Cooper, one of the divers, disappeared entirely. No body. No trace. His family still doesn't know what happened. 3 men. 4 years. From a team of 12. I did the math. I did it quietly. I kept it to myself. Because the alternative, going to someone with those numbers, meant remembering what Carol's name looked like typed on a government document. So I kept quiet. I kept showing up. I kept doing my job. I retired in 2003 with a ceremony and a handshake and a box of medals. I moved with Carol to the Pacific Northwest. We had 7 good years. She passed in 2021. Quietly. In our bed. In her sleep. I held her hand until it went cold. And then I was alone with the secret for the first time, without her warmth somewhere nearby, to keep me from falling too far inside it. The cancer diagnosis came 8 months later, stage 4, aggressive. The doctor was kind. He told me directly and let me ask every question I had. I asked him how long. He said probably 5 or 6 months, maybe fewer. I drove home. I sat in the driveway for a long time, and I thought about that viewport, about those eyes on the other side, about the decision that was made, whatever it was, and I thought, it's time. What I was told. Not what the don't want to tell you what I believe. Document said, what I believe, after 31 years of carrying this, and 8 months of dying. I believe they have been here longer than we have. Far longer. Measured not in centuries, but in time scales we have no comfortable language for. While our ancestors were painting on cave walls, they were building cities on the ocean floor. While we were developing agriculture, bronze, iron, gunpowder, they were developing things we cannot name, and then we arrived. We evolved. We spread. We covered the surface and started dropping things into the water. Noise, chemicals, sonar, nuclear tests. Garbage, and they noticed. The first contact, the real first contact, did not happen in a laboratory. It didn't happen with a public announcement or a press conference. It happened quietly, deep in the cold dark. Men were sent down, Agreements were made. I don't know the exact terms. I was never told the full history, but the structure of it was visible in everything surrounding our mission. Stay out of certain zones. Maintain certain boundaries. Do not weaponize deep ocean exploration. In exchange, the surface is left intact. That is the agreement, not written in any language we use. Not signed by any elected official, but real. Enforced in ways that are quiet and permanent. The men who manage this are not monsters. I want to be clear about that. I have thought about them with anger, with resentment, with something close to hatred. But when I'm clear-headed, I understand the impossible position they occupy. How do you tell 8 billion people that they share their planet? That the apex predator story is wrong? That 71% of Earth's surface belongs, in some meaningful sense, to someone else? That every navy in the world has been navigating around invisible borders for decades? You can't. Not without consequences that might be worse than the secret. So they maintain the secret. And they do it ruthlessly, because the alternative is a kind of panic we have no infrastructure to contain. But the secret is becoming harder to keep. The ocean is changing. It's warming. The chemistry is shifting. The noise we generate has increased exponentially. Commercial shipping, sonar arrays, offshore drilling, underwater construction. The deep places are no longer quiet, and the things that live in them are noticing. I've tracked the indicators from here at my kitchen table. Unusual sonar contacts in restricted zones have increased, not decreased. Increased. Mass cetacean strandings have accelerated. I've mapped them against known border zones. The pattern is not subtle once you know what you're looking at. The whales are fleeing from something, moving away from areas where whatever is happening in the deep is intensifying. They're displacement events. Biological pressure indicators. Organisms that have evolved alongside this deep civilization for millions of years. They know what it means when the deep becomes agitated. They leave. In 1997, hydrophone arrays operated by NOAA recorded an ultra-low-frequency sound. They called it the bloop. The official explanation was ice calving. A shifting iceberg releasing stress. I listened to the recording. I listened to it dozens of times. The frequency pattern is wrong for geological activity. The source location is wrong. The duration and repetition structure are wrong. What it matches, precisely, is the low-end register of the frequency I felt in that observation bay. The structured pulse. The organized rhythm. The sound that entered through the chest rather than the ear. They were broadcasting something, at power levels sufficient to be detected across an entire ocean basin. That is not a quiet civilization. That is a civilization that wanted to be heard, and there have been others since. The Julia Sound in 1999, the train in 1997, the upsweep detected continuously since 1991, all officially attributed to geological or atmospheric activity. All sharing a structural character that is inconsistent with those explanations. All consistent with organized, intentional transmission. They are getting louder, more frequent. Whatever the original agreement specified about mutual restraint, something is straining it. The committee knows. I can see the evidence of their response even from here. Restricted zones have expanded. Military deep sea activity has increased in the Pacific and Southern Ocean. There have been reports from fishing crews in the open Pacific, encounters they can't explain, vessels going dark for hours, instruments failing, crew members describing experiences that match what my team went through. They're reported to the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard refers them to naval intelligence. Nobody hears about them again. The suppression is still operating, still efficient. But the volume of incidents is increasing faster than suppression can manage. And then there is the climate dimension. The ocean is warming at a rate that is measurable, documented, undeniable. Whatever thermal dynamics exist in those deep cities, they are operating now in a changing environment. The agreement was built on a stable world. The world is no longer stable. And I don't know what the terms look like when the environment those terms protected no longer exists in the same form. I think about the being that came to the viewport. I think about those eyes. I think about the decision I could feel being made, and I wonder what it would take for that decision to go differently. Not in 1994. Now, in a warmer ocean. A noisier one. An ocean being filled with plastic at a rate that would have been unimaginable in 1994. What does patience look like for a civilization that has existed for millions of years? What does tolerance look like? What does its end look like? I've left documents with 3 separate people. Notes. Photographs from the mission that I was able to retain. A recording of the debriefing session that a tech named Haskins quietly made and slipped to me years later before he died. If something happens to me before this reaches you, those materials will still surface. I am not naive about what telling this story means. They will say the cancer reached my brain. They will have records to support it. They will find the depression I struggled with after Carol died and call it evidence of instability. They may be right that most people will dismiss this. But some will not. Some will start asking the questions. Why have we spent billions on Mars while leaving 95% of our own ocean unexplored? Why are the deep, sea-restricted zones expanding? Why do unexplained sonar contacts cluster around specific geographic areas? Why do the official explanations for certain acoustic events not match the physics? Ask those questions. Follow them wherever they go. To my sons, I'm sorry for what this makes your life more complicated. I'm sorry for all the years I was somewhere else, even when I was in the same room. It wasn't you. It was never you. Stay away from coastlines if things shift quickly. Trust that instinct. To the men still living from that mission, I know what I'm breaking. I know what it costs. I chose to break it anyway. 31 years is long enough. To whatever lives below us. If something in what I've written reaches you, know this. Not all of us are indifferent to what we've done to your world. Some of us are ashamed. Some of us would choose differently if we could. We are a young species still learning what we are. Please factor that in, and to everyone reading this who doesn't know what to do with it. Neither do I. I've been carrying it for 31 years and I still don't know. But I know this. The truth, whatever it costs, is better than the comfort of a lie that endangers everyone. The abyss has its own civilization. It has its own history, its own agreements, its own limits. And right now, today, we are pushing against all 3. My name is Daniel Reeves. I served this country for 28 years. I kept their secret for 31 more. And now I'm done keeping it. Whatever comes next, at least the truth is out. At least someone tried to say it. The deep is not empty. It never was. And what lives in it is watching us far more carefully than we have ever watched it.